Welcome back, and today we're working on the Emu Expedition once again. I've got a couple of upgrades I want to do to the electrical system, and here's why. The first thing I want to do is install one of these, and these things have been around for a long time and lots of people use them. So there's nothing new about the Victron Smart Shunt, but there is a reason why I've picked this one, and that's because of the nature of the wiring in this van. I actually really would have liked to have had a standalone gauge, just a meter that I could sit there and look at without having to get my phone out in order to see what the battery status is and how many amps I'm drawing, all that sort of stuff. But sadly, the wiring in this caravan is a pain in the neck when it comes to that sort of stuff. Let me show you why. Well, see, there's two places that a gauge would be actually kind of handy, and one would either be outside here in the kitchen, but probably even better would be inside where the old voltmeter is. I've actually put a switch on there so you can turn it on and off at night, because that's super bright, would you believe it or not, at night time. Now, the thing is that this gauge was wired in to this panel, not directly to the battery, and so it suffers from voltage drop from anything that's running over here, including lights outside or the TV. The other problem is that it's just a really cheap gauge. It's not calibrated to give me a state of charge, especially of lithium batteries. These are a bit of a hangover from when these things used to come with AGM batteries, but they come with lithium now, and this hasn't really kept up. So this would be a really good spot, but to get to the wiring here, you have to go through the channels that are behind this cabinetry, and you can't really get to them once the caravan's been put together. The only other way is to do what the aircon man did, and that's to run the wiring through, oh, where is it? Right up in this conduit that goes all the way along here and then down just up there, and you can see it up there, and then that runs down through the bottom of this drawer here and then out the bottom of the caravan and then under the caravan all the way around to the batteries that are under the bed. And that, well, that's a pain in the neck. So I thought to myself, let's just go wireless. So this thing here is going to essentially allow me to just tap into the battery terminals under the bed and then just access it via my phone. Not ideal, but it'll certainly work. Then I'll actually be able to keep an eye on what's happening with the caravan, whether I'm drawing too much power, how much power I'm drawing, whether there's any power going in or out, and what the state of charge is of the lithium batteries, which is the most important thing. We've just been guessing up until this point. Now currently we have projector gear in here, and it was installed from the factory. And look, I've been using this stuff for over 10 years, and I quite like the projector stuff for a mid-range quality type of product. Now, the sad thing about projector is I've been using these things for a little over 10 years, and in that time, the only thing they've done to upgrade these was add the lithium logo on there and probably a slightly different charge profile. These things were really fancy back in the day, having the remote head, a backlit display, and all that kind of good stuff. But nowadays, they've sort of fallen behind a little bit in that they don't really tell us the sort of information that we're after, and they don't give us a state of charge. Now, this is the 240 volt charger, and it's only a 25 ampere, so it works. If I was to replace it and do it again, I'd put something bigger in, but for what we use it for, it's enough for us now. We don't really use 240 a lot. And so that's why there's not really any point in replacing this. Now, the other projector product that we have in here is the DC-DC charger with the MPPT. Now, this is actually quite a nice little unit, and lots of people on the Expedition Facebook page seem to complain about this not working properly. I don't know why they have so many problems. I've never had a problem with this. It's a 25 amp charger with 5 stages, and it does both solar and car DC-DC, and it has an MPPT controller. So this has been okay, but the problem with this is I can't tell how much solar I'm getting in through the panels, and I've always wondered. It seems to always do a pretty good job at charging, and that's where this bad boy comes into play. Now, this is a seriously heavy-duty looking and feeling bit of kit, and this is going to go down here, I am guessing, just underneath there, something like that. This is a 100 volt, 30 amp MPPT charge controller. It does not do DC-DC. It's not the same as this in that it does both. It only does one. What that means is that I'm going to have to keep the projector one in here for charging off the car. Now, I actually quite like that because there's nothing wrong with it and it works really well. The thing with this is, though, it's 25 amps total. So depending on the car and the solar, it can only put out 25 amps of charging full stop. By having this run in parallel with this one, it means that when we're driving along in the car, we can be getting the full 25 amps off this one, and we can be getting whatever the solar panels are putting out up to 30 amps. We're going to be able to put out the maximum amount of charge from the solar panels and the maximum amount of charge from the car, both at the same time. When I'm driving along, I'm not super fussed about how much charge I'm getting from the car. Pretty much I'm going to know that that's putting out 25 amps, you know, most of the time because the car's running. What I am more interested about is how much solar we're getting from the solar panels. And so not being able to read the voltage of this doesn't really matter because when we're set up camping, we're not going to be using this at all anyway. Well, actually, there's going to be a little thing about that in a minute, but the car's not going to be charging when we're set up at camp, so I don't need to monitor that while we're camping, but I will be able to use the Bluetooth on this and the same app as the Smart Shunt to be able to monitor what we're getting put in from our solar panels. Now, the thing is, I had another idea about this as well. Having solar panels on the roof of the caravan is really, really convenient, and a lot of the times it works out really, really well. But we also have some folding King's solar panels that we can use in case we're parked in an area where there's too much shade over the caravan. But they come with a PWM charger, and as we all know, they're a little bit hit and miss in the quality and the amount that they can put out. And that means if I go and put another one of these little weatherproof Anderson plugs by Trailer Vision on the outside of the camper with an Anderson plug in it, I'll be able to plug the King's solar panels in and use the projector MPPT controller to run an external set of solar panels while using the Victron MPPT controller for the solar panels that are on the roof. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to disconnect the solar input from this here. I'm going to set up a new loom that goes down somewhere just under here. I'm going to mount this Trailer Vision Anderson plug so that we can plug our external panels in. I reckon this should be a really neat setup. Well, it's all going to be a fair bit of work, I reckon, so I guess we better get started. All right, we don't have a lot of light because I've turned the 12 volt system off, isolated it from the switch panel, and here's our lithium batteries. Ugh, what a mess. So what we're going to do is basically get all of these and all of these, and we need to work out where we're going to put this and then put all of those onto this terminal here, and then we're going to need a really big cable to go from there to the batteries. Well, we've come across the first snag. You see, this is like a 17mm bolt and the battery terminals are normally 13mm. None of these lugs are going to fit. Well, gonna have to come up with a plan here, and I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do as yet. Alrighty, so what I've decided to do is make this abomination over here, and this is just a bolt and a nut and some washers, and that's all of the negative leads that are on these two terminals, bar this one because this isn't actually a negative lead. This is actually a thermistor or a temperature sensor for the charger, so I've left that one attached to the battery. Hopefully that doesn't screw anything up. Now, what I did was I bolted them all together here because I didn't really have enough length to mount the Smart Shunt anywhere nice and neat. So what I've been able to do now is actually mount it a bit further away over here, which will give me hopefully some decent Bluetooth coverage. We'll see how that goes. And I've just made up this lead here that's going to, it joins onto all of this mess, and I'm going to make a second lead that's going to go from the top there of the Smart Shunt over to this terminal here, and then we'll use the existing balance cable there, which is still hooked up over there. So that's the plan anyway. I'm going to make this other lead up. Then the last thing that I need to do is get this small power cable and run that from the Smart Shunt and run that over there. Okay, so she's all sorted out there. So that goes to the battery, that goes to that wiring block that I made up there. Sort of a makeshift bus bar. I've taped it all up, and then I just taped it to that balance lead as well, just so that it doesn't move around. Everything's all wired up. This comes from the Bluetooth shunt, and this goes to the other battery. What we need to do now is wire up one of these little 12 volt leads, and we should be ready to test it out. Okay, all done. I just hacked it on there. I probably should have put it inside of that split tube, but yeah, it's hot in here. I can't be bothered. But we have liftoff. Little blue light there. I must admit, I need a cable tie too. I don't like that sitting like that. I'll sort that out. But yeah, we're gonna install the app and see if we're getting any good information out of it. It's all working, and the best bit about that is I just turn the charger on, the mains charger, the projector, and I can see how much it's putting in too. Well, kind of, minus the load, but you know, that's still kind of handy and useful. If I want to know the full load, I can go down and have a look at the settings on here. It'll tell me. So now we've got the Smart Shunt installed. Next is to install this MPPT controller. This is the 130, which I mentioned earlier. One of the reasons why I've gone the 100 volt version is that means I can actually rewire my solar panels into series. That will give the solar panels a higher overall voltage, which means they'll be able to come in charging and cut out from charging earlier and later in the day and give me more overall time. Well, I'm not going to do that today though. That's going to be another whole big job, and I've got to check and make sure that those solar panels are going to be all right for that kind of rewiring job. And I haven't even looked up there to see how they're wired. They were up there when I bought the caravan, and they've been working, so I've never touched them. Right, this is going to be a little bit tricky, I think. It's a bit tight in here. See, we've got quite a bit going on in here already. I have the Makita charger, which I mounted up here, which is a really neat thing to do. But we have bits of conduit going all over the place, and we're going to have to try and get this off. But to get that off, we're going to need to get this off. To get this off, we're going to need to get this conduit in here at least loose, maybe even off. Only then hoping that I'm going to have enough access. I might need to take this off as well in order to unkink this here. I've looked this up online, and this cable, this loom that comes out the back of the projector here, it probably only goes not even double that distance. So the joins for that must be somewhere in here. So we're going to have to get rid of this altogether to be able to tap into those solar panel cables and run them down to here, and also join up our new cables to run down to our Anderson plug that we're going to stick down here. Here we are. We've got that down. It was not too bad actually, although I have lost all of the screws everywhere that fell out, but okay, that's cool. Look, it's actually a pretty neat setup. It's got this bus bar here. I don't know if that normally rides on that sharp edge. I think that's just because I've pulled that down, but I'll make sure that that's not riding on that bus bar. Interestingly enough, I don't know why they've like tech screwed that little earth there in when you've got a negative bus bar there. That seems like a very strange thing to do. I also don't know why these Chinese caravans come with blue and white for negative and positive. I don't know what this big black cable wrapped up here is. We're going to have a little look into that and see what's going on there. Quick update. This isn't connected to anything. There's only a single wire coming out the end of that. I wonder what it was for. I want to know where that goes, because that might be really handy one day to do something. What's even stranger is it's Australian cabling, because all of the Chinese cabling is the blue and white stuff, and this is not. So someone's run this and then never hooked it up. Right, well, we're making some progress, but look what I found. Another spare wire, just this big mains looking cable sitting there. I don't understand. Okay, so good news is we now have access to our cables for the DC-DC charger. A little bit more investigation is going to be required to work out what's what and how they're connected and how we're going to break them apart and rejoin them, and then how we're going to run more cables. But all of this stuff runs down here, and I don't know where that goes. There must be a cavity in here. I'm really quite fascinated to know what's going on here. And look at this here, some cabling running through there as well. Not very well protected either, I might add. You can see there's been some nasty rubbing on this main positive lead up here. To maybe tape that up. Whatever this is, this looks heavy duty. I'm assuming that that's the roof motors, maybe? No, maybe that's the solar. Wow. If that's the solar cabling right here, I'm reasonably impressed with the size of the sheath on this. Oh yeah, it does say down there, solar in. It's actually pretty cool. So that's where we're going to need to tap in to run our Victron MPPT cabling. That's it's a bit as your father. I wonder if that's soldered. We'll find out. Oh, look at that. That hole down there where everything is running into, looks like it actually goes into this chassis rail here. There's a couple of things popping out here, but that's not all of them. So I'm assuming that they're actually running everything inside of here. Well, the good news is that the negative for the solar panel is actually soldered. So I wonder if I can trace this cable back. Oh yeah, look, that just goes straight up into that bus bar there. I can reroute that and go straight into the Victron. So I'm going to tape this bad boy back up and we're going to leave that as is. And we've even got a second little grommet here already that we're going to be able to use to run this cabling out here, so that's kind of cool. You see, this is what I was talking about with the solar panel voltage. I've just stripped open the cabling for the solar panel and we can see the open circuit voltage. It is fairly early in the morning here, but it's 23 volts. You obviously need to have more volts to charge your battery than what your battery's at. You know, it's like equalizing two water tanks, but also the profiles in these chargers require a certain amount of voltage too. So unless you've got 14.6 volts, these MPPT chargers are not going to be happy, because that's just open circuit voltage. When you actually start drawing off that, it's going to drop quite considerably. So if you run your panels in series rather than parallel, that means you're doubling the amount of voltage. It's like running two 12-volt batteries in series in a truck or one of those old GQ Patrols, so that you have a 24-volt system instead of a 12-volt system. Now, if you run your solar panels in parallel, quite often these chargers won't accept them, because most of these MPPT chargers for, you know, caravans and whatever else, most of them go up to around 30 volts maximum input for your solar. But that's where the Victron with the 130 is able to go up to 100 volts input. So that means we're able to run the solar panels in series and keep our volts higher for longer and get more charge. You also get the advantage of having less voltage drop, although these cables are pretty good. They're quite reasonably thick, but the lower the voltage, the more voltage drop you're going to get, because the higher the amps. It's Ohm's law, look it up. It's all on the internet. So by having higher volts, we get less voltage drop, which is just a more efficient setup. So more sun, charging the batteries for longer, and less losses in the cabling. So that's something that I'll look at doing later on. I'd also like to add that how good is this job here? Like, he's actually, whoever's wired this solar panel in, I'm guessing it's an Australian job because it's done to the projector. Normally, if it was done in China, it would be one of those Chinese brands, but well, it's actually pretty reasonably done. It's I'd be happy with that. All heat shrunk as well. Nice work. It's a pity actually, because when I first saw that heat shrink over there and felt that crimp on there, I thought there was going to be some cheapo yellow connectors, you know, like those type of things that I was going to be able to use. Well, now I'm going to have to cut that off and strip it and redo it all for both ends, but at least it was done properly. And for those of you knocking the setup on these Emu campers, as far as this DC-DC wiring goes, check out the thickness of this alternator cabling. Like, that's decent. I mean, that's nearly 8 gauge, if not being 8 gauge. And it doesn't go that far, so yeah, that's pretty good. I'm actually feeling more confident after looking at this than I was the whole time I've owned this thing. This is not terrible actually, it's pretty well done. Alright, I've mounted up the Anderson plug and I've put a little bit of split tube on here. I've drilled a hole down the bottom there so it'll be covered up by this inducting thing, and obviously I'll silicone that up, and then that'll come out there where that earth is for the 240 volt, and it'll run alongside, and then you can see I've drilled the pilot holes, gonna mount it up there It might be weird facing forwards, but I mean, that's supposed to be reasonably weatherproof. It'll stop all the muck getting in there, but also that'll deflect rocks, because we don't want the rocks hitting the back where the cable is. I'd rather, and having water force in there, I'd rather it be that way around. I would actually prefer to mount it that way, but there was just not really any feasible way to do that. So that way we'll just have to do. All nicely fitted up. I'll do the silicon later, and then that just comes up here. Once we've got all that done, we've already got our cables coming out here. That's going to go up to there for the battery connection to the MPPT, and the PV is going to be this short negative here that we've harvested, and this positive that I've crimped up and soldered here. And once we've got all that, we'll have to put all this back together. I'll leave all of these cables like this until we're ready to go, so I can cut them to the right length. We'll mount the projector back up, and then we'll mount this up, and then we will route all the cables and tidy all of that up. Okay, well, I've connected both of the new earths up here. You see that up here? See, I didn't use the proper terminals like they did, but that's okay. Well, one of them's running down there to the Anderson plug, and the other side of that, the positive's gone to the solar input on the projector. So that's for our Anderson plug for our portable solar panel. And then we've got this other lead going up here for the battery connection, which is going to go here on the Victron. And that's run up and splits up here and goes one into where all the earths are, and the other one is going to bolt onto the back of that switch, same place as where the projector does. The Victron will go in the same spot. I have actually turned the power off this time at the battery, even though it's a pain to have to move the bed out to do it, but it was just a bit sketchy trying to take that bolt off without touching anything that might short out and go direct to the battery. So we'll put that on. So once we put that on, we should be kind of ready to start bolting all of this back together, and then the last thing we can do is actually fit up the Victron and then fit off the wires for that right at the end. Okay, I've bolted up that positive to the back of the switch there. Also taped up this main wire that had some sort of scarring on it. Everything else is ready to be put back together. Got all of that back together. Just plugged in King's solar blanket. It's putting out bugger all, but it's picked it up and it's charging. So that's working well. And now we just need to go and sort out all of these and mount up this probably there. It's about ready to see if we can pick this thing up with the Victron software. Alrighty. Well, it's all done. So it's all back together. Sort of tried to tidy that up as much as I can. It's a bit hard with the 4 wires coming out, but it's all working really well. Actually really happy with the amount of power that those factory solar panels are putting out. They've actually been punching out a little over 260 watts on average all day today. It is probably a pretty ideal day, although there's a little bit of cloud here and there, but very, very good. And the range, actually I was worried about the range of the Bluetooth, but even with all this metal around, it's working really, really well sitting out the other side of the caravan. Both of them are, even with all the doors closed. Awesome. Very, very good. Oh well, that's the Smart Shunt and MPPT Solar Controller from Victron mounted into the Emu Expedition. If you've used a different solar charge controller on your caravan, or even specifically on the Emu Expedition, drop a comment down below, let us know what you're using. If you're using the Victron, let me know if you've been happy with it. There are some configuration changes that I need to make to both the Smart Shunt and the MPPT controller to make them work with the lithium batteries. I'll actually do a separate video on that because there's going to be a little bit of mucking around there. It'll just be a really short one to help people out if they're trying to configure their Victron stuff with their lithium batteries, because for some reason they're still defaulting to AGM, which is kind of a bit weird in this day and age. But anyway, remember to like and subscribe to the video if you like my content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.